Educating HG, the narcissistic psychopath at school. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. My output is prolific. I have written many blog articles, created thousands of videos, written books and created material for the Knowledge Vault, which educates people about narcissism and psychopathy. I explain to you why my kind behave as we do, why we target you, what you can do about that. I unravel the mysteries of the narcissist's behavior, so you understand why the narcissist has said what he has said, why she did what she did. I cover the various areas where narcissists are prevalent with regard to the problems that we cause. I have the ability, as a consequence of my repeated and regular involvement with my kind, to explain the differing perspectives that we have, the different subschools of narcissists, conveying to you the way that they differ from one another and are similar with regard to outlook, behaviors, and conduct. I have written from the perspective of the victim because I have so many, and I have listened and observed, assimilating that information, collating it, and then regurgitating it for your benefit. My work is comprehensive and is part of building a legacy. My work is unrivaled, although there are others that copy. I also debunk the nonsense that is written about my kind by various individuals that have latched onto narcissism as being somewhat trendy, and all they do is regurgitate myths, provide you with nothing new, and in some instances, issue information which is not just misleading and false, but downright dangerous. Those pretenders need to be silenced. But amongst all the various facets of narcissism and psychopathy that I visit, the analysis of famous and infamous individuals, that I put those people under the Tudor scope so that you get to learn what people are and also understand why they did what they did. I have created a huge amount of material, and within that, I have also allowed you to understand more about me, the way that I function, the way that I see the world, my perspectives, both in terms of my narcissism and psychopathy. I've allowed some of you to come on a journey with me through the Knowing HG series to learn more about what causes me to function, the aims that I have, the people that I have interacted with. Through my psychopathy series, I've enabled you to understand that aspect of me, the colder, cynical, detached aspect. And now, I'm going to, in an intermittent series, enable you to understand even more about me. I've allowed you to understand the way that I have behaved in relation to intimate partner primary sources through the asylum of the grotesque. Now, we're going to turn to the issue of a younger HG during my education. It's often the case in the course of an interview that I undertake that I'm asked about when did I know that I was a narcissistic psychopath. And I explain that I've always known that I have been different and set apart from those around me. I recognize that I reacted differently compared to my siblings. I recognize that they showed certain weaknesses that I did not. I realized that with my interactions with my parents, they were different from those that I later learned were taking place between my friends and their parents. I became furnished with knowledge as a consequence of a girlfriend informing me as to what she believed me to be. But of course, during my time at both primary and secondary school, I didn't actually know that I was a narcissistic psychopath. I just knew that I was different. I knew that my fellow pupils became distracted by idiot minutiae, that they were often led by their emotions, resulting in them doing bizarre things, that I saw that they failed to achieve because they lacked focus, that they cared too much about what other people needed, that they were not focused on the end goal. And thus, in this intermittent series, I'm going to allow you a little more into my world by understanding about certain things that occurred during my education. I'm going to start perhaps midway through it all, when I was in my 5th year of school. For those of you unfamiliar with the UK education system, back then, when one entered secondary school at the age of 11, that was the 1st year. And then there was the 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year, and 5th year. The 5th year was between ages 15 and 16. My form teacher, who was a history teacher, albeit not my history teacher, was a pleasant, bespectacled lady. In the course of a review, I suppose it would be determined, she said to me, "HG, we know that you are a very, very clever boy. We know that you're very driven and you excel at everything you turn your mind to. And we think that is wonderful. But do you just think that you might be able to turn down the superiority at times? I know," she said, "you're probably going to end up as Prime Minister of this country, or a general, or even James Bond," at which she laughed. The fact is, it would do you well, perhaps just to turn down the superiority that you exhibit. I knew that she meant well, even though I found her words to offend me, for she was telling me that my behaviour was not as it should be. But I had also come to learn, as a consequence of being a member of her form, that not only did she intend well, but she was doing this from a position of actually wanting to help me, rather than hinder me. And therefore, the irritation that I experienced I pushed down, and I explained, "I will see what I can do." That caused her to smile, probably as this was commensurate with the view that had already been formed about me. I knew that what had precipitated this conversation was undoubtedly a conversation that had come from my games teacher. I wouldn't quite describe him as being my nemesis, but he was an individual that had it in for me. This individual was, like many sports teachers, a frustrated athlete and sportsman. I excelled at football, at cricket. I had a dalliance with rugby. I was an excellent athlete and cross-country runner. He recognised my innate talent. I was a sprinter. I would compete successfully at 100 metres, the 200 metres, 400 metres. He suggested that I actually would be better suited to being a middle-distance runner, which I laughed at, pointing to the fact that I held the school records in each year for running the 100 metres, 200 metres and 400 metres. I remember on one occasion when we first undertook the practice of the 400 metres that I set off with such speed that I smashed the 200-metre record for the entire school by the time I'd reached that point on the track. By the time I'd reached 300 metres, I was nearly spent, as I had set off far too fast. Nevertheless, I was so far ahead of the field that even though I more or less jogged the remaining 100 metres back in, resulting in me collapsing to the grass and hearing my fellow pupils say, "Look at his chest," as it was rising and falling so quickly to get oxygen, that nevertheless I'd once again excelled and broke the record in relation to the 400 metres. Thus, with this games teacher, he had suggested to me that I should shift from the activities that I excelled at, 100 metres, 200 metres, and 400 metres, to instead run 800 and 1500. I knew that if I did, I would likely break those records too, but I preferred to be a sprinter. The immediacy appealed to me. He often criticised me in relation to my cross-country performance, whereby I would sit perhaps in the middle of the pack in 10th position, and then, right towards the end, would suddenly sprint in, passing other individuals, so that I would finish perhaps third, second, or even first. "Why would you not try harder earlier on, HG?" he would say. Or Tudor, for he invariably called me by my surname. I would just look at him and offer no response. I wanted to explain to him that it was because I enjoyed luring the others into believing that I wasn't able to succeed, and that something happened whereby, as I sprinted in the last section of the race, I felt a power surging through me as I went past the person in 9th position, 8th position, 7th position, 6th position, and so on, that it edified me. But I resented having to explain myself to this mustachioed individual, a man who had grown that hair upon his upper lip in an attempt to make himself look more military for the purposes of trying to hold sway over us. He said to me, "You know, Tudor, if you trained, you would go much further." And I said, "Well, all I need to do is travel 100 meters quickly, sir. Therefore, I don't think I need to go much further than that." This resulted in him labelling me impertinent, and resulted in numerous occasions where he reported me to my form teacher. It was a bit of a recurrent theme throughout my education that I was deemed to be impertinent. I was actually a fairly model student. I spoke when asked to. I was not a loud pupil. Yes, I got along with my friends, but I wasn't disruptive in class. I undertook my homework, handed it in on time, excelled in my studies, regularly finishing towards the upper echelons of the class, if not at the top of the class in particular subjects such as history and English and geography. Notwithstanding this, I cultivated an undeserved reputation for impertinence, which was simply born out of the fact that I preferred accuracy. One instance of that was, I recall, in relation to the Stockton and Darlington Railway. This opened in 1825, and it was the world's first public railway to use steam locomotives. In the course of a geography lesson, the geography teacher, a softly spoken man who had a strange habit of waggling his head from side to side as he talked, explained that the Stockton and Darlington Railway opened in 1815. I immediately put my hand up because this was wrong. "Yes, H.G., he said, as I interrupted what he was saying with the raising of my hand. "Sir, the Stockton and Darlington Railway opened in 1825, he said. I explained to him. There was a slight murmur from others who knew that that was correct. He nodded. He didn't thank me, and he just carried on talking. I know that he then fed back to my form teacher that I had been impertinent in showing him up. I found this to be ridiculous and unfair. I had simply pointed out that he was wrong and I was right. I did not do so in an unpleasant fashion. I didn't shout out, "Duh! It's 1825, you dumb fuck." No, I put my hand up politely, the agreed-upon procedure to get the teacher's attention. I explained of the inaccuracy that he had issued, but nevertheless, this was a repeated theme. They felt threatened by me. I think that they sensed that I was better than them. I think that they sensed that I was indeed different to them. There were certain of the teachers that, notwithstanding their attempt to hold the hierarchical position of pupil-teacher over me, I could see that there was a recognition that I was very much different to them, and they feared it. It put me in mind of another occasion, which involved my games teacher once again, whereby he determined that as a consequence of the fact that I refused to train in athletics, seeing no need to do so, because I was winning every race that I was entered into, both at school and county level, that he took it upon himself to punish me by dropping me from the football team. This was representative of the spiteful nature of this man, and introduced me to a useful lesson in recognizing that those who are weak exhibit their envy, and, where possible, seek to take it out on me. Something I learned very quickly, and thereafter sought to nullify. I recall walking away from the school that evening as the minibus of the team that we were due to play, or that I should have been playing against, pulled up. I attended a school which was a considerable distance away from where I lived, and I knew a number of boys in that town through the Sunday football teams that I played for. Those boys were playing for the opposing school, and as the minibus pulled in and slowed down, they jumped out to see me. "HG, where are you going?" they asked as they saw that I was heading for the gate. "I've not been picked," I explained. They looked confused. Strange decision, but then that turned to delight, for they recognised that somebody who was an able footballer and was likely to stand in their way of victory would no longer be involved. It turned out that my school lost 4-0. My departure was clearly problematic, but this was the ridiculousness and lack of logic that this games teacher applied. On another occasion, the librarian, who occasionally deputised in games, was refereeing a game that we were playing in games. It was a Friday afternoon, and again it was in the 5th year, and it was a useful end of the week, whereby we were able to just have a football match between ourselves, refereed, as I say, by the librarian, the games teacher, moving around watching the various games that were taking place amongst the boys of our year. The librarian missed a blatant handball, to which I yelled, "Handball!" He shrugged and waved play on. I continued my protest. Such was the level at which I was articulating my protest, it came to the attention of the mustachioed games teacher. He blew his whistle, halting play, and marched onto the field of play. I stood there. He approached me. "Tudor, what are you shouting about?" "Mr. Librarian missed a clear penalty, sir. I was simply pointing that out to him." Again, I had issued my protest not in an insulting manner, not in an unpleasant manner, but simply with a cry of "handball," and then, "But sir, that was a clear handball, you've missed it." I explained to mustachioed games teacher what I had done, and indeed that is what he had heard. Instead, he chose to focus on me, telling me to unfold my arms because this was a pupil-teacher situation. I failed to stifle a laugh at that point, and thus I was sent from the field of play. That, of course, meant that he became noted in my mind as somebody that needed to be taught a lesson. Something I will tell you about on the next occasion. But it was evident in this individual that he was weak, that he recognized an individual that was superior to him, and instead, rather than cultivating my ability, became fixated on trying to punish me by picking on me. He didn't upset me. He certainly didn't frighten me. I knew that I was a better athlete than he ever had been, that I was a better cricketer than he was, even though he played at a decent level, that I was superior in playing football to him, and that he hid behind his status as the teacher and that I was the pupil in order to try and utilize that hierarchical position to control me. And I was not having that. It was a frustration for me, because I raised my objections with regard to inaccuracy, the failure of Mr. Librarian to make the right decision in the football match, and I was perplexed. Why could he not admit to his failing and award the penalty that he ought to have done so? Is it because it was me? Or is it simply that he couldn't admit to failure? These were matters that I cogitated upon as I stood at the side of the pitch watching the rest of the game continue. I could see the looks from my teammates, offering what looked like support as a consequence of the fact that I had been unfairly ejected from the game for simply stating my position. Notwithstanding this fact and the accusations of impertinence and even the teacher beseeching me to turn down the superiority, I never, ever bowed to what they wanted. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.